Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're embarking on an absolutely epic quest deep into human biology. I want you to imagine our hero, a single microscopic oxygen molecule. Its ultimate mission: to travel from the outside world, navigate the deep, complex cavern of the human body, and literally help forge the energy that keeps us alive. It's a journey packed with biological traps, tight corridors, and some absolute engineering marvels. But hey, before we even start the journey, we really need to clear up a very common misconception. People swap the words breathing and respiration all the time, right? But they're actually totally different things. Breathing, or ventilation, is just the physical process of inhaling and exhaling. It's just moving air in and out. Cellular respiration, on the other hand, is our ultimate goal. That's the complex biochemical oxidation of food to create the raw ATP energy you use to run, jump, or just stay alive. Basically, we have to do the physical breathing to make that biochemical respiration possible. Okay, let's dive into this. To make sense of this incredible system, we'll track our oxygen molecule's journey through 3 distinct spatial steps: the nasal filter, crossing the throat, and finally, the windpipe to alveoli. You might be wondering why our respiratory system is so incredibly complicated in the first place. Well, just look at how evolution optimized us. Simple aquatic organisms have it pretty easy, really. They can often just exchange oxygen directly right through their skin, or they use gills in the water. But humans, we live on dry land. We require a highly complex, deep internal lung system to optimize our oxygen intake while protecting our delicate respiratory surfaces from completely drying out. Zooming out for just a second, there are 5 overarching stages to get from a breath of fresh air to actual usable energy. First, you have ventilation, then exchange at the alveoli, transport through the blood, exchange at the tissues, and finally, the big one, cellular respiration. But today, we are focusing entirely on step 1. We're looking strictly at the physical path of getting that air securely inside the body. Step 1. The nasal filter. I want you to imagine shrinking down to the exact size of a dust particle and entering the nose on a really cold winter day. The nasal cavity essentially acts as a biological AC unit and a highly advanced air filter. Because when you breathe in, that air is raw. It might be freezing, it could be super dry, and it's absolutely full of microscopic dust. So as our oxygen hero enters, it has to dodge hairs and sticky oil glands that are perfectly designed to trap those impurities. And at the exact same time, the nasal cavity is conditioning that incoming air. It's warming and humidifying it to match our perfect 37 degrees Celsius body temperature so it doesn't shock our delicate lungs down below. Just picture zooming past those external nostrils, literally tumbling through a microscopic forest of protective hairs and mucus, getting warmed up, and finally arriving at the internal nares. That is the actual gateway deeper into the head. All right, pop quiz time. Let's do a quick checkpoint. We just mentioned that the nasal cavity has a special sensory layer. Do you remember what it is that actually allows us to perceive the smell of a rose? I'll give you a second. It's the Schneiderian membrane. It sits right there in the nasal cavity, actively sensing odors as the air rushes past. Step 2. Crossing the throat. So, our little oxygen molecule has now reached a super treacherous intersection called the pharynx. This is a common biological passage where both the air we breathe from our nose and the food we eat from our mouth literally share the exact same route. Talk about a design risk, right? Which begs the question, if food and air are traveling down the exact same tube, how does our food not just drop straight into our lungs? Well, meet the epiglottis. Think of this little guy as a vital biological traffic cop. It's a cartilaginous flap that immediately snaps down over the opening of the windpipe, which is called the glottis, every single time you swallow. It directs your dinner safely to your stomach, completely saving our respiratory journey from a catastrophic food avalanche. Safely past the epiglottis, our oxygen enters the larynx, rushing right past the vocal cords. And here's something really fascinating. Under the influence of testosterone, male vocal cords become thicker and longer, which results in a lower pitch voice with a higher amplitude. Female vocal cords, on the other hand, generally remain thinner and shorter, producing a much higher pitch. And here's a totally surprising anatomical fact to go with that. Have you ever wondered what the Adam's apple actually is? It's literally just the enlarged, thick thyroid cartilage of the larynx, which naturally grows more prominent in males. Try this. Gently touch the front of your throat right now and hum a little bit. That vibration you feel, that is your larynx in action. Checkpoint 2. Let's see if you were paying attention at that dangerous intersection we just crossed. Which specific cartilaginous flap acts as the traffic cop to prevent your dinner from falling into the windpipe? Yep, you guessed it, the epiglottis, an absolute lifesaver. Step 3. Windpipe to alveoli. Now, we are plunging straight down into the chest cavity and have officially entered the trachea, which is your central windpipe. Now, despite that amazing nasal filter, some microscopic dust always manages to make it through. But the trachea is lined with millions of tiny hair-like structures called cilia. And here's the coolest detail. These cilia constantly beat outward, pushing a layer of sticky mucus right back up towards your throat. It's literally a biological escalator carrying dirt away from your lungs. And actually, that is exactly why we sometimes need to clear our throats after hanging out in a dusty room. Now, think about the incredible engineering of the trachea itself. It's supported by these sturdy cartilaginous rings, but they are C-shaped. They aren't completely closed circles. Why? Well, it's an absolute engineering marvel. The rigid front keeps your airway from collapsing like a deflated balloon every time you exhale. But the open back of the C gives the esophagus, which sits right directly behind the trachea, plenty of room to actually expand when you swallow a massive bite of food. Riding that airflow downward, our hero reaches a literal fork in the road. At exactly the level of the fifth thoracic vertebra, this single trachea splits, or bifurcates, into the left and right primary bronchi. Without hesitation, our oxygen molecule makes a sharp turn and dives headfirst into one of the lungs. Once inside the chest, you really see how meticulously protected these vital organs are. I mean, the lungs are constantly inflating and deflating, right? To prevent them from scraping painfully against your ribcage, they are encased in a double-layered pleural membrane filled with pleural fluid. This incredible fluid acts as a biological shock absorber and completely eliminates physical friction as you breathe. And here is another absolutely brilliant quirk of human anatomy. The left lung is actually slightly different from the right one. It features what's called a cardiac notch. Because your heart sits slightly to the left in your chest cavity, an area we call the mediastinum, the left lung literally has a special carved-out space just to comfortably house your beating heart. How cool is that? But of course, air doesn't just pull itself in. The heavy lifting for this entire ventilation process is actually done by the diaphragm. This massive phrenic muscle sits right beneath the lungs, completely separating your chest from your abdomen. When it flexes, it physically pulls air into your body. Think of that huge, deep breath you take right before jumping into a pool. Interestingly enough, having a diaphragm is actually an exclusive anatomical club feature. It is entirely unique to mammals. All right, final checkpoint. Let's lock in this knowledge before we finish up. What exact anatomical feature prevents our trachea from collapsing in on itself when we blow air out? You got it. It's those brilliant C-shaped cartilaginous rings keeping the airways securely open. So let's review the epic completed path of our microscopic hero. From the outside world, our oxygen molecule braved the nasal cavity filter, navigated that super dangerous pharynx, slipped right past the vocal cords in the larynx, rode down the C-ring trachea, took a sharp turn at the bronchi, and finally landed deep inside the tiny air sacs of the lungs, known as the alveoli, right next to the blood. Our hero has successfully infiltrated the body and is currently waiting at the very edge of the bloodstream. But this brings up a massive cliffhanger. How exactly does this tiny gas molecule physically cross over into our liquid blood, travel all the way to our tissues, and actually forge that biochemical ATP energy we talked about at the beginning? Well, my friends, that is the magical process of cellular respiration, and it's a thrilling quest for our next explainer. Keep wondering, keep learning, and I'll see you next time.